More Than Metaphors is a virtual love space for those poetic and poetic-ish voices to examine the question, what happens when we find the courage to live our poetry out loud? A conversation led by me, Dr. Keisha Brown, an author, educator, entrepreneur, and poet. More Than Metaphors combines guest interviews and posts from my blog, which focuses on transformative learning, love, justice, and liberation. Each episode of this podcast will provide encouragement for leading more meaningful, spirited, and poetic lives.
And it was a time where I was very connected to my devices, and they talked about, it was really simple. I think sometimes the simple things are what we need to hear, but they talked about just getting outside, leaving the phone at home, because my habit is turn on a podcast and then go walk around my neighborhood. And so even yesterday, I took my dog out, left my phone at home, and just really appreciated what the surroundings that are around me were. And so just finding really a lot of value in that, and enjoying what's outdoors, enjoying what God created, instead of using consistent distractions that can numb me to seeing what's out there.
Welcome back, everyone. I am excited this afternoon to introduce all of you to one of my new friends and colleagues, Kendra Stewart, who is the principal of Kindred Consulting. And she will be having a part of our chat around what does it mean to live your poetry out loud as an entrepreneur, as a businesswoman, as a Black businesswoman at that. So Kendra, I just want to say thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Really what I'm doing is I'm returning the love, because you and Elizabeth will be with us shortly. But you all interviewed me for your podcast. And I just want to make sure that, we're sharing the love and also showcasing the real positive work that's done in this environment. So
I love that.
And I would love for you to tell our listeners, our guests, our folks, a little bit about you and what you do.
Sure. So I am Kindred Orlinda. I run Kindred Orlinda Coaching and Consulting. I met Keisha because we both are from the University of San Diego, and I went through the master's program there and got my MA in Leadership Studies last year. And I previously worked in social services. I did about 10 years working for nonprofits, working in lower income communities, working with youth, working with working adults looking to advance themselves, and found that social work necessarily wasn't for me, but still working with those populations really was. And so I wanted to continue the work, got an interest in doing professional development, which led me to being at USD. And then here I am now. I'm working towards getting my ICF coaching certification, and I'm coaching and still working with those from lower income communities and working with people of color, working with really people who I think, after learning what coaching is, and that's like a really interesting story, but how valuable coaching is how inaccessible it really is for those who it's from, lower income, underrepresented communities. Keisha, coaching is a $1 billion industry. And people, when you're coaching, a lot of people, look at where the money is and coach the big wigs. But I really wanted the development side to benefit everyone. And that's where right now I'm moving towards, is I work with people from all backgrounds, and I want to make sure that this field is something that's accessible to people who might not always have that open door to experience growth this way.
Right. And I appreciate how you sort of packaged it around this is a $1 billion industry, right? And
it is.
and let's talk real stuff. Black women, we've been coaching folks forever. There's some sister that's coaching somebody while they're braiding someone's hair right now, right?
Yes,
valuable,
absolutely.
Just valuable words of wisdom, support, challenge, all of that. And for many of us, this is innate. This is just Tuesday, right? Yeah. And what does it mean when we show up and we validate what is commonplace in the community?
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so that's one of the areas where you and I connected. Right?
Yes.
So tell me, so you know that the podcast is all about words and stories. You can't sit up here, well, that's another story. You got to tell the story, girl.
Oh my gosh, it's embarrassing, but you know what? I think it's true to myself. So I got into the University of San Diego's master's program for leadership studies, and we had to take elective credits. And when I went to the introduction information night, I think is what they call it, and they said, "Oh, you can do coaching." And I don't know what the disconnect in my brain was of what I thought coaching was and life coaching, even though I know now it's much more than what I thought. But I was just like, oh, okay, so like I just help people to, enjoy their life. It was a very base level thought. I walk into my first coaching class with Dr. Zachary Grain, who I absolutely adore and has taught me so much. And in the first 15 minutes, I'm like, oh, I am out of my depth. This is not, we are talking about, sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but I was partnered with a gentleman, and it was talking about, well, what are you doing here? Why are you here? What is coaching? And all the things I described were none of the things that I thought coaching was, or found out that it was over the year that I did the course. And it was that thought of like, oh, I'm just going to help people enjoy life. And we're going to, talk about the lighter stuff, the things people might see on TV as it's portrayed. And as I went through it, learned the models, all the stuff, everyone kept saying, you're here for a reason. Your background puts you here. And I'm going through like the first semester thinking, I can't do this. I'm going to drop out the certificate program because this makes no sense. And the validation that I would get from both my peers and from my professors at the end of that first quarter, that I absolutely should be here. And what I'm going to offer, despite my own thoughts and narrative that I was still telling myself that I couldn't do it, was going to be the reason that I could. And so that's why I'm like, it's a funny story because I never thought that I would still 2 years later now, over 2 years, be here. Yeah, here I am talking to you about how I'm coaching others. So.
Right. Not only coming from that program, but now you are running your own business. So okay. So once you get you start to feel like you know what you're doing in one place, you jump into a new opportunity and you're like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing here, right?
Oh, yeah.
A little bit about what it's been like running your own business.
So I think the first thing, as I looked at the question you sent me, let me go to my notes because I want to make sure I said this the way I wrote it down because I thought it was very good.
You were impressed with yourself.
Huh? I was impressed with myself. But I think that my mindset was that I'm going to go, I'm going to do all the things, I'm going to be, not necessarily like I'm going to be super great, but everyone's going to flock to this. And I think especially in this industry and doing the work that we're doing, something I learned building my business, talking about what I was doing, I was super excited, but not everyone was. And then I would take it personally and I would internalize, well, maybe I'm not a great coach. Maybe no one really wants me to be a part of their growth in this way. Maybe I should just stop. I'll be real. That was a thought I had for a while. And it was coming to the realization, not everything you do is for everyone else. And they might not be the biggest fan of that part of your life. And that's okay. Especially with my friends and my family, they do support me so much and I'm so grateful. But sometimes I would explain stuff and I'd walk out of a class or I'd walk out of a workshop that I had presented and talk to them about it. And you get, oh, I'm so glad, it seems like it went really well. And it's creating that support system in starting a business and continuing it that I'm very blessed that I have now, and is still building, but creating that support system of people who understand the work, or that at least show enough interest if they don't, that they want to hear about it. That's one of the biggest things I've gotten from building a business, especially I think as a woman too, because there's like an extra pressure. And then as a woman of color, as a Black woman, there's an extra pressure sharing, oh, I'm starting a business. For me, like there was pressure of like, what is money going to look like? What is the income going to be? And I understand like, we got to pay bills. We got to keep ourselves fed. But yes, obviously I'm going to need to make an income, but the purpose of this for me, the people I know I'm going to help and the people I have helped are the reason I'm doing it. And explaining that to the right people was the most important thing for me to learn, because in that way they could support me, keep me on track to the goal that I've said that I'm doing and the work that I'm doing. Sorry, I think I ramble.
No, this was perfect because the right people, right?
Yeah.
Because there are people who, especially when you start a business, everybody has advice.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the gamut, right? And you're sitting there like, okay, so that doesn't even make sense. That's not even my area of business. Where'd you get that from? Mm-hmm. So what has been, given some of your connections to the right people, what have been some of the best pieces of advice that you've had? And so we got to balance. Mm-hmm. The other side of it.
Yeah.
Some pieces of advice that you're like, man, where'd that even come from?
I think actually when I spoke to you last summer, and it was the first time we talked, and I still keep this and I'm using it as I'm coaching. So thank you for the gift that keeps giving.
I want to hear this. What did I say?
You said, I was talking about, I got to put this together, but I'm struggling. And you said, if it's not resonating with you, if you know this is not your skill set, find someone who does really well at that and have them support you. So like using like resources and websites, that we have access to, like Fiverr and things. So I've done that recently as I'm putting together and launching a new website. I'm not the best writer of things of myself and bragging. And it's something I'm working on because that's a confidence thing. But I knew writing my bio, I just kept looking at a cursor, blinking on a Word document, and it was going nowhere. And so I decided, actually, Libby's going to write my bio because she knows me. She's worked with me for a year now. So she knows where I excel. And she's going to point out things in me that I might not say about myself. And I trust her in that. But you giving me that piece of advice to, have people help you with this. We're bringing someone on to help edit because we both acknowledge, and we're taking on new jobs. We both acknowledge that is a capacity that we're not the best at. We've just been able to do it. Right. If we have someone really great who can do that and help us, we're going to bring them in and make sure that we can produce content to the best of our ability for those who listen.
Right. Now I remember why I said that. I'm like, what did I say? But and the other side of that was, especially as entrepreneurs and business leaders, we're going to own that, is we are creating opportunities for other people.
Yes.
We can't just sit here, I'm going to do everything. And then that's the entrepreneurial trap. I'm going to be the CEO, the COO. I'm going to be maintenance. I'm going to be the graphic designer. Okay. So as you level up, who else are you bringing along with you? So they can help themselves and their families, especially right now during this pandemic, When folks are like, okay, I'll do anything. Well, we don't want you to do anything. We want you to engage with your talent.
Yeah.
You love. You're a graphic designer, and yes, you have to bag groceries. We see you. And could you help us with this marketing? And we'll pay you.
Yes. And we'll pay you. And I think another really important thing, and we talked about this on my show, but in being able to outsource to other people, I want them to also know their rate, because I undervalue myself. I presented numbers for coaching. Girl, you're making nothing. What are you doing? You're underselling. You're undervaluing. And so when I talk to people, hey, I need help with this, I want to hear what your number is. And sometimes we need to up this. This is not enough. You are worth more than this. Look at the market, come back and see what you're offering and compare yourself to others. And once again, I mean, as women of color, as people of color, we do this. As Black people, we do this. And it's one part society does undervalue us, but then we also can internalize that and undervalue ourselves. But I just want to make sure, like you said, if we're having people help us, especially in this time, they're getting paid what they deserve. I just think it's so important. It's so important. People will gladly underpay you. Take advantage. Gladly.
And then there's that cultural piece of, well, I'm here to serve. And not saying that serving is wrong. So y'all don't come for me talking about, well, she Black, she don't want to serve. I do want to serve, and I am a humble servant. But there was a point where I learned when I was in New York, when I was working on my doctorate, people would ask me to do work, and I used to kid, but I really wasn't kidding. I was like, you know what, if you give me a sandwich and a Metro pass, I'll show up and I'll come in and do the work, right? But I didn't understand at that point. It's like, so what are you saying about the value of your work?
Right.
And just those gestures, because there's someone who's getting paid a lot of money to do the work that you're doing, where you can do it better, and they're not doing it as well.
No.
And so we have to shift that. And so it's taken me a long time to get there. So I appreciate that you brought that up. Because, where'd that come from? But that's helpful. That's helpful.
Yeah.
So, okay. Absolutely. So you talked about that again, but what's some of the worst advice that you were like, no, I'm not going to do that?
I got stuck on that question because I tune people out. I've learned the ability to let it flow in and flow out. I don't hold, if I can look at the source and understanding the source and who is saying it, it just flows out and I don't hold it. But I'll just generalize some bad advice and you let me know if any of these have hit. So one is absolutely just follow the money regardless of the purpose, which does not sit well with me. I'm a purpose-driven person. I've done work without purpose in it and very much hated what I was doing. And I don't see myself living a life that way. Another thing, I think one of the things the most that maybe bothered me as advice, I don't know if it was bad advice, but bothered me, was in focusing on the people that I want to work with and the people that make me enthusiastic to wake up and know that I'm going to have conversations with them and help them in their growth, and that they're undervalued. And wouldn't you want just to coach leaders? Wouldn't you want just to work with the C-suite? And that's not that I don't want to work with them. I would want to work with everybody. I just want to work with someone who wants to work with me and sees the goal for their own growth. That's it. And I think that as coaches, as consultants, we can get so caught up in a niche. And I don't think I'm a niche. I feel like I'm all the things. So how do I limit myself to just being in this narrow little box that you want to put me in because you want to make sure you can categorize me on your website. It just didn't sit right with me. I don't know if that like wound around the answer. And that's it. I'm just not a niche. I'm not a niche.
I love that. And then you shifted it. I'm all the things.
I'm all the things. I will coach you on mindset. We can coach on confidence. We will coach about leadership skills. We can coach about, personal growth and work-life balance. We can coach on a million things. Because are we as coaches, I mean, this is just my experience. I am still new in this field, but I'm just going to say this. You could edit this how you feel. But one of the best pieces of advice when I talked to people as I was networking last summer was that in the development field, you're not always going to get into an industry or a organization where you know the full background. And so like pigeonholing yourself into that one thing, you're missing out on all the other things going on around in the world. Get information, learn it, but don't stick yourself in a corner where you have to fight your way back out of it.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And that reminds me of understanding your impact is greater than just your niche.
Mm-hmm. So much greater.
And so given that, and I'm glad that you stepped out and just broadened your reach. Because one of the other areas aside from your business is this remarkable podcast that you and Libby co-host. So talk a little bit about what that's like. So transitioning from being this business leader to hosting these conversations where essentially, quite honestly, you're doing a little bit of coaching.
We are, yeah.
And then having other people come in and provide their nuggets of truth around coaching. So talk a little bit about that.
So I co-host with my amazing host, Libby, the Adjacent Self podcast. I think we just have the coolest dynamic because we come from opposite worlds. And I say that to say, it's not just racially that I'm white and I'm not white. I'm black and Libby's white. But we grew up differently. We grew up in different socioeconomic statuses. We come from different spiritual beliefs. We have had different relationships with family members. And every week we get to have these really great conversations with each other where we grow, but also with these guests that come on who talk about how they use the work they're doing to be their best self, to live their best life, to step into the adjacent and know that the possibility to continue to work at their best level is there, that it's not impossible to grow. I think that's one of the coolest things. And it's honestly, I get so excited to have these conversations each week because I would never think to have a podcast on grief, but we had one, and I cried in that episode with Dr. Cheryl Getz because she talked about her late husband, and I got to talk about people who I lost in my family and just experiences we had with them, regrets we had that we didn't get to have with them. And if you would have told me when I was thought a year ago as I'm making my business plan, I'm going to host a podcast, we're going to talk about grief and dying, or we're going to talk about the Stop Asian Hate movement right now. We're going to talk about body positivity, and we're going to talk about, gosh, what else have we talked about? So many things, but we're going to talk about all these things. I would have never believed it. I wouldn't have.
I have to check out that episode with Dr. Cheryl Getz. Shout out to Dr. Getz.
Yes.
Phenomenal.
She's amazing. Please do. It was probably one of my favorite episodes that we've shot.
You answered a little bit about I had a question around what has been one of the best lessons you learned from a guest. Is there maybe another one that bubbles to the top? I'm going to be honest. Zachary Green. I was listening to him and I was, I was power walking while I was listening to him. And I'm like, wait a minute, I need to write this down. Like, oh yeah. What are some of your your takeaways from the best ones? Yeah.
Dr. Green's episode is one that we still talk about at the CLA, where the Adjacent Self podcast is ran through. We talked about it last week with what's happening right now with both Black and Asian Americans, and now the George Floyd case happening. We had a full conversation about his episode, and we're still learning from it. So definitely that one. One of my favorite ones that we had recently this year is with Goody Howard. She is what is her title? A sex ed superhero. And I just learning from her about sexuality and learning from her, we had a really amazing conversation around religion. I don't think it came out on the podcast, so maybe I shouldn't talk about this, but we did have a great conversation around religion and the basis behind how women are viewed sexually and still used by Christian men, even though later on when they're ready for marriage, they're rejected. Those Christian women are rejected for the more pure, but we're still used. But I think another really cool thing I learned from her, and especially from my background that really opened my eyes, is just learning about the gender spectrum and learning about having really conscious and open conversations about sexuality, and that it doesn't have to be an uncomfortable thing to express needs or express wants with a partner. I don't know if you want to talk about sexuality, I can give you another example of that. Keep going. Okay.
We're human. We grown folks on this show.
I mean, it's part of life. And I feel, yes. And it's part of life. And I think those conversations need to be had, especially as women, because we are not conditioned to talk about sexuality. So
somebody say it, please.
We aren't. And we talked about that too. And to have 3 women on the show talk about it. I come from a very religious background. The other 2 didn't. But to have that conversation and the feedback I got from people, that was the most feedback I've gotten in an episode. I had people texting me for like 3 weeks. I listened to this episode and I'm so glad you talked about this and I learned so much and I want you to have this person back. Another person, I think, or rather they were a couple with Sonia and Sebastian, and they run Nature Unplugged. And it was a time where I was very connected to my devices, and they talked about, it was really simple, but I think sometimes the simple things are what we need to hear, but they talked about just getting outside, leaving the phone at home, because my habit is turn on a podcast and then go walk around my neighborhood. And so even yesterday, I took my dog out, left my phone at home, and just really appreciated what the surroundings that are around me were. And so just finding really a lot of value in that and enjoying what's outdoors, enjoying what God created instead of using consistent distractions that can numb me to seeing what's out there.
We love our distractions, right?
We do love I love some Instagram and TikTok. Let me tell you.
I have a knot in my thumb right now.
Yes.
I'm like, what is that?
I remember the first time I looked at my hand, I'm like, my skin is dry. And then I talked to my best friend. She's like, that's because it's from swiping and touching your screen.
Kendra, you have the Instagram ash?
Yes. And I was like, no, that's not. She's like, yeah, that's what's happening to you. Wow. Put your phone down. So right here, holding my phone like this, right here, the skin was dry. The thumb skin was dry from swiping. That was the clue I needed.
That's gonna be the new one. They're like, they Instagram ashy.
The Instagram ashy, yes, the dry skin. I had to go and buy some what's it called? Aquaphor.
God. Oh my Lord. Well,
So them being on the show.
I didn't know we were going to get into ashiness, but I'm glad
we are moisturized today.
Moisturized. Matter of fact, I think I might have to put some more on. But I'm looking forward to the next part of our conversation.
Yes.
Where
yes,
we
please.
talk the nitty and the gritty of how do you get ready
in the zone.
Right?
Yeah, I love that.
I hope today's episode was helpful. I'd love to hear from you, hear about what you think, hear about what other questions are coming to your mind. Feel free to send me a message at anchor.fm/MTMetaphors/message. I look forward to connecting with you in our next episode. And until then, keep learning, keep thriving, keep moving towards liberation, and remember that our words, the power of our words, are so much more than metaphors. Talk to you soon.